What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel indeed. So today we're going to be going over the top 10 plus best glyphs in the game for the Paragon board, the end game. So starting off, there's something very important to mention. Not every class gets the same glyphs, because I had people ask me, how do you get that one glyph? Well, to get any of the glyphs, the easiest way is to just do nightmare dungeons. That's how you acquire these. However, an important thing is one class may have a certain glyph and another class may just not have it. Sometimes they are renamed, sometimes they are the exact same name. So even if you're watching this, and I'll try to put some timestamps down below for when I'm doing like the Barbarian, Rogue, Sorceress, but some of these, they overlap and they have kind of the same name. Sometimes they have different names, but do the same thing. So it's better just to watch the full video so it explains everything, but I'll try to put timestamps again for the class because, you know, people just want to watch their class. I get it, but again, there's some overlaps and there's some things to mention that do have crossover. So that said, let's get started. So first off, what are the best glyphs in the games that everyone can use, right? All the classes can use. There are two that every single class needs to have. If they don't have this, if you're watching any build guide in the future and they don't have this, unless of course these get nerfed, which is entirely possible, then you want to close out the video. Territorial and exploit are by far the best. Okay, so let me explain what these two do. So territorial, starting right off, keep in mind you can change the glyph level, so if yours doesn't look the same, that's why. So starting right off, territorial, what does it do? So you deal extra damage against close targets. Now, there's another bonus where you get 10% damage reduction against close enemies. If you're playing this game, even if you're playing a ranged character, eventually they're going to come close to you. You can actually run this on a lot of ranged builds as well, but for the most part, every single build in the game more than likely will have territorial as well as exploit. The reason why is just because it gives you so much damage and damage reduction. So make sure that if you're watching any build, you have both of these in. It doesn't matter the class you play. Territorial and exploit are pretty much going to be the best, unless you're doing something really weird that you don't want to run territorial. Pretty much territorial and exploit are going to be in every single build. So I already went over territorial because you just basically take less damage and you deal more damage, and it's just really good overall in terms of getting some mitigation. And then on top of that, exploit is super good. It applies vulnerability. If you guys haven't seen damage buckets and how it works, basically you want to try to tag all these certain aspects of the game in terms of getting bonus damage to vulnerable, getting the core skill damage, and all these things. Basically, you want to throw in exploit because it's an easy way to get extra source of vulnerable damage, and vulnerable damage is basically required in the game if you want to get high damage. So what it does, it automatically, once you have the requirement met, it's going to automatically apply vulnerability for 3 seconds. So what this means is all the trash targets, you just don't really need to apply your vulnerability. You don't need to use your basic ability or do something to apply it, which is what some builds need to do. Basically, you just need to cast it on bosses. This is one of the best things to get earlier on, and for most builds, if your build can have it. Another thing I want to mention at the start, the Paragon boards are different for the starting boards in terms of how much dex and other stats that it offers. So let me go ahead and give you guys an example. So we are doing the Barbarian right now, but if I swap to Necromancer here, you'll see that this one has a lot more int. As 39 dex, if I go to Barbarian, we have 39 dex as well. So you have to factor that in, and different Paragon boards will actually add different amounts of strength, dex, intelligence, willpower. Each one of the boards has a different amount that they add. So make sure you factor that in before you just think, oh, this is the best one, just throw it in. You need to check and make sure that you're putting it in a Paragon board that meets the requirements so you can actually get it, okay? So that said, starting right off with the Barbarian, that's what I want to start off with. But again, all classes, exploit, territorial, throw those in. Those are the best. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's get started with the Barbarian. Again, some of these do have some overlap and the name's a little bit different, but for Barbarian, the best one, starting right off, I'm just going to put these at level 20 just so you guys can see when you level them up kind of what's the number. So the first one I want to go over is Disembowel. What does it do? Well, we're really looking at the bonus with the additional bonus where killing a bleeding enemy has a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your non-ultimate active cooldowns by 1 second. Barbarian took some big nerfs with the shouts department, so this really helps out for that. The next one up is called Martial, and this one makes it so after casting a shout skill, the active cooldown of every other shout skill is reduced by 1.2 seconds. Again, you'll notice Barbarian really needs shouts. That's kind of how they run. Territorial, again, is going to be a good, and that's going to be mentioned several times in the video. Undaunted is actually an okay one as well. You get extra damage reduction the more Fortify you have, and if you're playing Barbarian, you're going to have Fortified, and you get more damage. So more damage, more survivability. You can't ask for more in any node in the game. The last one for Barbarian that I really recommend you guys check out is the Wrath Glyph. This is something you're probably going to get later in the game because earlier on, like while you're leveling, like once you just hit level 50, you may not have that much crit unless you're doing like a whirlwind build, which you can get a lot of crit on. That thing just got nerfed too, but hey, nonetheless, getting any amount of fury just to spam your abilities and keep things up is always great. So those are the best Barbarian ones. Next up, let's go next down the list and move on to the Necromancer. So Necromancer, in terms of the best ones over here, again, make sure you check the glyph over here in terms of where you're socketing in. But the first one I really like with Necromancer, and I feel like this is by far one of the best ones. This one over here is called Essence. So what does it do? You get increased damage, and again, let's go put it to level 20 so we can see the big numbers. So this one, what does it do? Your core skills deal more damage. Every build in the game will do core skills, so more damage is good. And then you deal 22%. A lot of these damage numbers, they'll be like 10% increased damage, but this is 22 against non-healthy enemies, which means if the enemy is 80% or under, you do a massive bonus damage. This is actually probably the best glyph. It might be one of the best glyphs in the entire game in terms of like numerical stats. It's actually very, very massive. Next up over here with the Necromancer, I like Amplify. Amplify is pretty good. It's just an instant 10%. Some of these, you'll notice with certain builds, it'll do like 1% increased damage, but then it'll ramp up to 15%. On average, again, most of the numbers will be a 10% increase, and then you'll get some other bonus. But yeah, this one is just, you just throw it on and instantly you're just getting some damage. So it's a fast way to get damage. Sometimes people just like to get that instant gratification of damage. Again, Necromancer Territorial, throw that one in as well. And then Dead Razor, kind of nice. This one is dependent on what you're playing, where your minion deals damage. And this one ramps up super, super fast. It is a 12%. Again, most of the numbers are 10%, but they'll increase if they have some sort of condition. But the Necromancer one, you have so many minions, this one just ramps up almost instantly. Again, that's if you're playing minions, which is relatively popular for Necromancer. And then Control. Control is a pretty nice one to have. You get to deal increased damage against slowed, chills, or enemies, unless they are stunned or frozen, which if you can apply, then that 20% is much better, but it already gives you increased damage and increased damage against crowd control targets, which most builds will do, or if you're playing in a party, someone's going to apply it. This is excellent. Again, if you're playing in a party, I've noticed sorceresses are really nice to have when they are able to freeze everything. That 20% increased damage is very, very nice. So those are the best Necromancer glyphs in the game. And by the way, these are all considered like the meta glyphs. I checked out like every single one over on the D4 builds as well as other streamers and stuff like that. So these are considered the meta, by the way. So next up, Druid over here. Now, unfortunately, Druid doesn't have that many good ones unless you're playing Bear, but everyone for the most part is pretty much playing Pulverize anyways. But there is one that I think is just really good and stands out of all of them. Okay, so every 5 dexterity over here, this one's called Spirit. So every 5 dexterity purchase, you get some increased damage. Okay, like whatever, that's normal. There's a lot of these ones where it'll be like increased damage based on like, you know, some sort of stat point. But the additional bonus on this one is massive. Critical strikes increase the damage of an enemy that takes from you by 2% for 20 seconds up to 12%. Now, most people will get the key passive, so there's a 5%, or if it's a crit, it could be 10% chance to get yourself maximum value for all of your resource, and you get 100% crit chance for a short duration. All of that stacks up. This one is massive, and you're just gonna ramp it up. I know it's like the small amount, you know, again, 10% going to 12%, but like this one just works so well with the Druid, on top of the first bonus being really easy to, of course, obtain. It's just like more damage. Some of them, you get like really good additional bonuses, but the bonus is bad, or some of them will have the bonus is really good, but the additional bonus is not very good. Again, make sure you're looking at where to socket these in, as the Druid actually uses willpower, which is not the most common in terms of having good nodes unless you're looking at like specific trees. Again, make sure you factor that in when you are socketing in your glyphs. But the Druid, okay, so I mentioned Spirit is really good. Now the rest are kind of only for the Bear, which is what most people are playing. Again, Territorial, get that one. Big and Claw is okay. It just makes it so while you're in any form, you just get that instant damage. Now, the more recent update actually nerfed a lot of the nodes, like all of like the attack speed nodes, all those got nerfed, so you're getting any of those bonuses to the other nodes. It's a little bit weaker, but it's instant. Again, it's the over 10% number, and on top of that, this one at least you don't even have to like ramp up, so that one, Fang and Claw, is okay. And then on top of that, we also have Keeper. So Keeper, makes it so you and your companions deal increased non-physical damage. And the reason why this one is good, and you might be thinking, well, like if I'm using physical damage, why would I want this? There's a few things. There's one where all of the werebears count as earth skills, therefore they don't apply, so you just get that massive bonus. And there are a few other things in Diablo 4 in general where they'll count as other skills, so that's kind of nice to have, so you just basically get the bonus with that. So Keeper's okay. Some classes they're kind of weaker. And by the way, don't feel like you have to put every one of these glyphs in. Some builds will only run 3 to 4 glyphs, but again, you want to throw an Exploit and Territorial. After Keeper, we have Undaunted. So Undaunted, this is more so for Werebear. Most people will be playing Werebear, but Fortification gives you extra ability, you get more damage, and on top of that, more damage reduction when you have Fortification. So Undaunted, no question, very easy. And then the other one is actually just called Werebear. There's Werewolf and Werebear. As far as I'm aware of, there's not really that many people playing Werewolf, but if you want to, hey, throw that one in. But Werebear is the go-to one. Just extra damage reduction, extra damage. Good. Both of them are actually good. Now we're running into my favorite class. We have the Rogue. So with Rogue, the one that I really like to get earlier on, again, territorial as well as exploit, run those. But combat is actually really good, so you get increased critical strike damage, and rogue actually has a lot of crit just built in. But I like this one earlier on because of resource, so it's called combat, and the additional bonus makes it so skills that critically strike restore 12% of their energy cost, but on top of that, you get increased critical strike damage. This is a level 1, so if we go to the max level, we'll see how much damage it adds. 9.6 per int, but then again, that bonus of getting the 12% regen, very, very good. So that is the good one. And then closer or ranger. There's a few other builds that will run closer. They have basically the same like effect. It's just like while you're near things. This one, while wielding a melee weapon, you take 10% reduced damage. That is really, really good. And on top of that, you get extra bonus on range and cutthroat skills, which is excellent. And then there's one just called ranger, which literally just gives you the kind of like opposite. When you're running a ranged weapon, you just take 10% reduced damage, and then you get increased marksman skill damage. So again, basically, you're going to be able to do more damage and take less. Those are like kind of the best glyphs in the game. You'll probably notice that there's kind of a pattern to it. And then next up, we have Turf. Turf is excellent. You take less damage against close enemies, but then you deal more damage to close targets. And this is mostly if you're playing Twisting Blades, which is like 99% of the rogue community right now. So Turf, grab that one as well. And then on top of that, Ambush can be used. I know the trap build is really popular. I just dropped the video on the build, and it's really popular. There's a lot of streamers and content creators playing the trap build as well, because it's good. And if you do want to run this, they just take increased trap damage. They take increased damage from you as long as they're affected by a trap skill. So even though it increases the amount of damage you deal, this one is still like an okay one. There's not really too many other good rogue ones other than the first 3 that I mentioned. And again, exploit is an excellent one to have as well. Okay, so now we are actually on the last one with the sorceress. So with the sorceress or sorcerer, again, same ones as always. You got to have exploit. Control is actually pretty good. Most of them will have some sort of ability to slow or chill. Right now, I would say there's a mix up in a lot of different playstyles of sorcerers, but I would say ice is the most popular. Basically, any cold variant skills. There are some where you're just going to mix in things, like elementalist can be actually a pretty good one. Numerically gives you the biggest number, but some people are just playing like ice, or they're just like, I want to play a firewall, or they want to do chain lightning. I really like chain lightning as well. But basically, this one does more damage to crowd control targets. The sorcerers can apply really easy, right? And then on top of that, you get to deal 10% increased damage, but it goes to a 20% multiplier. Again, the Necromancer has the same one, control. So again, that's what I was mentioning, the things are going to be overlapping. Tactician is another really great glyph. So what it does is it makes it so you deal 10% increased damage for a few moments after using a defensive skill. This one is actually quite nice if you want to play a little bit closer. It is a very popular one, again, just looking at what people are playing. And then territorial, which is what I've already mentioned. This one also has territorial. Again, you get to get increased damage to close targets. I know some people like to play further away as a sorceress, but eventually you're just going to run to melee targets, and especially on a lot of the world bosses, you kind of stand in between the toes. So that's just kind of how it works. And then on top of that, Unleash is actually a very good one as well. I like this one because it gives you extra mana regen. So it gives you damage, and on top of that, you get increased mana regen for a set duration. But you can basically keep that up, and I'm pretty sure how it works is that extra mana regen is not just flat mana regen. Anything else that gives you extra regen, like the rogue can give you increased regeneration like percentage, and that works with other things that would give you regen. It's not just like the passive regen, if that makes sense. So this is actually pretty strong because it works well with other things. The bonus to magic nodes is okay, but on top of that, winter is good as well. Winter makes it so whenever you chill an enemy, you deal increased cold damage up to 15%. As far as the meta goes, there is another one that I will briefly mention. I'm not going to consider it on my list to be good. The reason why is because you cannot constantly freeze certain bosses, and that basically just makes it so it's a node that's not as good. This one also is important to put it in an area where it matters because the bonus affects the cold damage node. So make sure you put this in an area that benefits off of this. If you want to do this, and this is a great just bonus tip in general, what I like to do if I'm doing any build for Diablo is I like to literally add every single Paragon board. This is actually a really great tip for anyone that is interested in building a Paragon board in general, unless you're following a guide, but this is just an excellent thing to do. So again, if we go to, let me type it in again, winter. So again, if we look at winter, we're going to have the Paragon range nodes, right? So we're going to look at the word cold. And now what we can do, now that I've placed all the Paragon boards, I can find out, okay, well, which one has the cold effects that we can maybe benefit off of? Okay, so well, this one doesn't really have it. What about this one? Okay, well, there's a couple cold nodes over here, but it's resistance. So you'll have to factor that in as well when you actually build any of your Paragon boards. Unfortunately, this one, it might not be super, is there any cold damage? Okay, we have cold res, cold res, cold res, cold res. Okay, is this only affecting? But yeah, what I'm trying to say, and you know, there's going to be expansions later down the line, so this is just good knowledge just to have. So if we go back to winter, does it affect all cold damage and cold damage reduction modifiers? So at the end of the day, it still might be better to put it in there versus just putting it in an area where you don't get that benefit at all. So you'll have to, again, choose what you want to do. I wish the glyphs could actually overlap, because then there would be actual insane complexity with the end game. But anyways, after winter over here. So as far as the glyphs, so I already mentioned winter. Flame Feeder is a very popular one, and that's because Inferno is kind of one of the most popular ones to actually use. That's a giant snake that can suck everything in, and it just gives you really good damage. So this one, it does apply a burn effect, and so you just deal increased damage to a burning enemy. So even if you're not playing fire, most people will play the snake one anyways, and then you just get to do increased damage to burning targets, and that's going to apply the burn for you. So that's going to be good. And then on top of that, I really like these ones over here. So Elementalist, in theory, it gives you the highest number. And on top of that, this one makes it so all the things within range give you a bonus to their non-physical damage and damage reduction modifiers. So the bonus is actually pretty good as well. Again, look where you want to put that thing. That's important. But on top of that, the additional bonus is actually very similar to, I think it was called it was like Tal Rasha's Elements. It was actually in Diablo 3, and it was in a lot of things, or it was like Elemental Exposure or something like that. Basically, what it means is you do all of the types of damage. Now, most people will play Inferno, and it depends on the build that you're playing. If you can meet 3 ticks, it's really good. But if you meet 2 ticks, it still does what it needs to do, which is just getting you that increased damage of 10%. But that 15%, if you can apply all 3, that's excellent. So yeah, Elementalist is really good. And then Reinforced to do a, I don't know if they do a hyphen. So Reinforced. Okay, so this one I think is kind of nice because you just get flat amount of damage reduction. Now, if you can get the bonus of getting the bonus of all the rare nodes and then get just 10% damage reduction, because you're going to have the barrier as a sorceress, or you can just get Temerity the pants, and that's one of the best pants in the game. Every single build will probably at some point want to try to fit that in, as it's a really good thing to have in the game. But yeah, extra damage reduction can be quite nice, especially earlier on in the earlier stages of your Paragon progression. But that's going to go and wrap it up. So that's all of the best Paragon ones. Those are the meta ones that everyone is running over on like D4 builds and other streamers and content creators. But if there's any other ones that you felt like I missed out on that could be good with some very special unique, I would love to know down below, because you know, Diablo 4 is brand new. Some people are coming up with some cool ideas. But if you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here and you do want to see more content, hit subscribe, turn the bell, and check the pinned comment for even more Diablo 4 videos. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.